home of Welsh sport. This is Cymru Sports. You're listening to Cardiff City World on Cymru Sports Radio, live from the Welsh capital. The most interactive football show in Wales, featuring guests, fan opinion, and all the latest news surrounding Cardiff City. Have your say and get in touch now.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to Cardiff City World on Cymru
Welsh
Sport Radio.
This is Cymru Sports.
Got a jam-packed show for you this evening with lots of guests, lots of debate, lots of all things Cardiff City for the first hour, and then in the second hour, the Welsh Football Hour, we will be discussing all things Welsh football, including JV Cymru Premier League. We'll be talking the EFL club and of course the national team, among other things. But let's get straight into it, and I'm delighted to be joined by the voice of Welsh football to a whole generation, and it is none other than Mr. Rob Phillips. Welcome, Rob. How are you?
Hi, Kevin. Yeah, very good, thanks. Very good.
Good. Thank you very much for joining me, and it's really interesting because obviously I've tried to get you on in various forms for a while, and I was very eager to have a conversation. But you're obviously a very busy man, and I think it's really interesting actually that obviously you announced over the weekend that you're kind of stepping away. Is it a full-blown retirement or kind of semi?
No, very much. I would say a semi-retirement. Yeah, as you probably know, there have been redundancies at the BBC. I was a voluntary redundancy, but I will be back in. So I've got one or two things that I want to do anyway, and it's just now is the time. I don't mind saying I'm 65, coming up to drawing a pension for long, so it's about time I took it a bit easier, and now seems an opportune moment. But I will still be at games. I'll be in press boxes, and who knows where I'll pop up next.
Indeed. It's really it's fascinating to me because you've had such a storied career, and you've certainly witnessed the highs and the lows of Welsh football, both at club level, but also the national team particularly. Talk to me a little bit about the national team. Obviously, going back for some of us older folk, it was quite painful at times. And then, of course, 2016, I think we experienced something that a lot of us had come to terms with, that we were never going to experience with a major tournament.
Yeah, absolutely. What I'll say is that I've been covering Welsh football I've been on the BBC 27 years, so nearly 28. I was 10 years on the Echo, where I had the privilege of covering Welsh football. I even did a little bit on the Argus on Wales before then. So it's been a long time. And I'm there in 93 when Wales were beaten by Romania, and the tragic events of that night. I was there when Mark Hughes' side just failed at the final hurdle in the playoffs to get to the Euros in 2003. And I'll tell you a little story which I'm really fond of telling, because it says everything about the man, but also maybe I think I was there on behalf of fans. But when Wales qualified for Euro 2016 in Zenica in Bosnia, you remember it was the result elsewhere. And I went off on one in the commentary box about how good it was, etc., etc. And afterwards, I was in what they call a mix zone after games, where the manager and players will come out and they'll stop if they want to. Well, I was there with a cameraman, and Chris Coleman came out through the door, and obviously he'd been celebrating, and he you remember at the final, he didn't even know that Wales had qualified. He had to be told by Mark Evans, the international secretary, and he came out and gave me a big hug because he's a big lad, Chris Coleman. And when he hugs you, you are hugged. And he said to me, something I've always remembered because it felt so special. He said, that's for people like you, Rob, who've seen us when we are, and he used the word, which I won't use, but when we were terrible, sort of thing.
Of course,
and all the sort of rubbish you've had to watch. And it was a great night. And honestly, I've said it to a few people that night we were in a dry hotel, but we bought a few beers just in case there was a reason to celebrate. And we were about half an hour away from Zanitza where we stayed. And it was myself and Kevin Ratcliffe and Ewan Roberts and one or two others. It was a pretty small radio team out there. And we had a little quiet drink to ourselves because we bought some beers, as I said, on the way. And I remember saying to Kevin Ratcliffe, aren't you at all, you know, Rats, not only brilliant for Cardiff City when he was there, but an absolute legend in my eyes of the Welsh football team. Brilliant captain of the team, fantastic player, one of those Welsh players that you hold in great esteem. And you really feel at the time when he was playing in the 80s at his prime, and Neville Southall and Ian Rush, they all missed out in 93. They should have got to a finals. But I said to him, are you at all jealous that this team have done it and you haven't? And he said, not at all. He said, I'm just so chuffed that they've done it, as you know, that something that we couldn't do. And he's very brutal on it. He said, we didn't get there because we didn't deserve to get there. We weren't good enough. This team are. And I've always said as well that I think that night in Zanitza, Wales crossed the Rubicon, because Chris Coleman always used to say, I don't want to just qualify once. I'm not saying we're going to qualify all the time, but I want us to be regular qualifiers. And since then, I've been lucky enough to go to other Euros, to a World Cup as well. And who knows what might happen in this World Cup.
Yeah, it's an exciting time for Welsh football. The young players coming through at the moment, 16, 17, 18s, 21s. There's so much quality there. It's really exciting. With regards, you mentioned Kevin Ratcliffe. Funnily enough, out of all the various people I've been privileged enough to interview and speak to, Kevin Ratcliffe's one of my favourites, because as a kid, he was one of the first Welsh sort of national team players. It was just like a genuine hero to me. So to have the opportunity to have him on a podcast during COVID with myself and Andy it was a real privilege, you know, and such a nice guy, very honest in his opinions as well, which I always like. Rob, when you look, how difficult is it when you're commentating and, you know, going back to those sort of dark times where we weren't very good, shall we say? Like, how difficult is it to, obviously, you know, you've got a job to do and stuff like that, but you're also a proud Welshman who wants Wales to do well.
Yeah, I missed the last bit then. How difficult is it to sort of say what you think while coping with the team? It's a hazard of the occupation. You know, you're never going to get on with every player. It's only happened to me a couple of times with Wales. There was one occasion when I think, if I remember, I was on the Echo, and I wrote a match report, and Neil Slatter rang up to complain about either a mark I'd given him or a comment I'd made in the Echo about his performance. But generally, they just cope with it. I always remember, I don't know if you remember, Simon, but there was a spell when I was on the Echo where we were doing sort of colour covers of the Football Echo. So it was pink, and the one time we were going to, I think it was the Faroe Isles, and Rhodri had hardly scored in his last 10 or 15 Wales games. It was rare. He'd gone a few games without scoring. And I wrote this piece about, it was about time he got goals for Wales again. And Terry Yorath, who was a brilliant, I was really close to Terry because I used to do his column on the Echo for him. I ghosted it for him. There was a front page of Ian Rush on the Football Echo saying, can you give us a goal, please, Ian? Words to that effect. And Terry Yorath brought it on the plane. So there was no escape. And he said, hey, Rushy, have a look at this. See what Rob has written about you in the Football Echo. But Rushy never batted an eyelid because he was just too good to worry about stuff like that. So players tend to know when they've had good games or bad games, and the really good players really don't worry about what you say. You've got to go in hard because that's your job. You're there for, I can be critical in commentary. The summarisers are critical, but they all know whatever club I'm covering. If it's a Welsh club, if it's two flies going up a wall, I want a Welsh fly to win. So I don't like to think. I mean, you don't always, maybe I've got to be. No, I won't say I've been careful at all. I think you just have to be sort of judge the situation. But I hopefully never ducked out of saying what I needed to say at an appropriate time.
Yeah, and I think obviously, the people who are listening or watching you, they want authenticity and they want your honest opinions. It's just how you go about giving them, I suppose, isn't it? And it's being professional and stuff like that.
I've always said it's commentary. I've always said commentating for Radio Wales, it's not biased towards Wales, but it's commentary with a Welsh accent. And I don't mean that literally. I mean, I've got a Welsh accent, I think, but it's commentating from a Welsh perspective. And
Indeed,
that's different to being biased towards Wales. Yes, I get excited, but I get excited when, I don't know, Newport County score, Swansea City score, Wrexham score. But, and when Wales score and big games, we just know the importance of the Welsh national team. And I see it with other commentators as well. If you're not going to get excited when a goal goes in, don't bother commentating on football, because that's what it's all about.
Of course, yeah. I mean, the passion is what makes it, and I think the best pundits and the best commentators are the ones who let that passion come through. Obviously, there's a line and things like this, but I mean, ultimately, that passion coming through is massive. You've commentated on some very famous moments at club and national level, and that passion shining through during those moments is what makes it special. It is what makes it stick in the mind of people years later. Is there a particular moment for you where on your commentary career where you look back and you just think like that's just pure magic?
There's been plenty of times. I don't think I've ever been pure magic. What I mean is that I think there've been magical moments that I've had the chance to commentate on. And I suppose the most famous moment, other than my mistakes, it would be the Sam Vokes goal in the Euro 2016 quarter-final against Belgium. There's a strange story to that, because it was a joint commentary with me and John Murray of the Radio 5 football correspondent. And he said to me just a few minutes before, you go second, Rob. I'll take the first half of each half, because you split it. He doesn't do one half, then I do the second half. We take half each of each half. He said, you do the second, because if Wales win, there should be a Welsh voice on the commentary. So I missed commentating on the Hal Robson-Kanu goal. That was John Murray, and he did it in his... I am a huge fan of John Murray, so he did it in his exemplary fashion. But I had the pleasure of Vokes' header getting Wales to the semi-finals, totally unexpectedly. And I saw Sam Vokes a few weeks ago at Southampton when I was down there for an FA Cup game with Swansea, and he was there for TV, and I was chatting to him. We were reminiscing about 2016. Because he often jokes with me, I've made you famous because of that goal. And he's right. It's probably my most famous bit of commentary, I would venture. I don't know. But
that was certainly the moment when I was asking the question. That was the moment I was thinking of.
Yeah.
But it was remarkable, wasn't it? It was so unexpected, I think, for Wales fans. I mean, that whole tournament felt like the unexpected. We were happy to be there as Welsh fans, and it was like, if we can get out the group, that'd be great. But even before that, I think it was like, if we could get a goal, something to celebrate for all the fans there. And it just kind of, your ambition during the tournament kind of just kept growing. And it must have been...
Simon, we went to Sweden, as you probably remember, the week before, or the Sunday before, for a game. So we were there Thursday or Friday, I forget what day. Played Sweden, got battered in a friendly. And then rather than go back to Wales, we then flew to Stansted and then flew out to France. And we had no idea when we were coming home. And at one stage, it was my son's birthday, my eldest son's birthday, at the end of June. And I was still there, totally unexpectedly. You're right. We were going there thinking, happy to get a goal. Just don't disgrace ourselves. Then, Russia was one of the best performances I've ever seen by a Wales team. Northern Ireland, we scrapped through. And Belgium was just unbelievably good. And I remember my daughter put on Facebook saying, my dad says he doesn't want to miss birthdays or whatever, but we all really know he wants to stay out there. And she was spot on. So, yeah, and it turns out the semi-final where we lost was on my birthday. So it was quite something. But that whole adventure, I'll never forget Bordeaux, the first game, because I stood there for the anthem and I thought, wow, 30,000 Welsh people in a foreign stadium at a major tournament finals. It was more than the stuff of dreams. And I still think back memorably. And I've been downloading some photos today of that 2016 tournament. And it was just the most magical, unforgettable trip. And going back to Sam Vokes, he was saying, actually, Rob, he said the media, we got so close to the players in that 6 weeks or whatever. He said, you actually lived it with us. And it was so good. The FAW did everything right. Chris Coleman was just a joy. All the players were great to deal with. And it brought everlasting memories. And I know that goes for others who were there for one game or all the games, It was, you're not a fan with a microphone, but, on those sort of days you are.
I mean, I got to be honest, Rob, if I was commentating on those games and the Welsh national anthem was playing, especially that first game, I think I'd have been commentating through tears. It was such an emotional, it felt like every game was an emotional roller coaster. One thing which I found really interesting, what you said, was about the Russia game. So I regard the Belgium game probably as one of my greatest nights, like as a fan watching football. It was just such an unbelievable evening. But I do tend to agree with you. That Russia performance was just a simply sensational performance by the team. But what separates the two in terms of why do you sort of lean towards that Russia game being such a good performance?
Because we were dominant. I mean, you couldn't say we were dominant against Belgium. We deserved to win because the way we came back. Because they scored an unbelievably good goal. And let's face it, every Welsh fan there, I would venture, thought this could be a long night. But actually, the way Wales came back and we were worthy winners. So you might say, well, the opposition was much better. But for actual dominant Welsh performance, that is up there with the very best I've seen in my time of watching Wales. I would add probably Croatia recently at the Cardiff City Stadium, where I thought that was a terrific performance. There aren't many where we had total domination, but there everything worked well. Maybe Turkey and Azerbaijan as well in that Euros when Conor Roberts scored really late on. Ramsey, and I think the common denominator was often Aaron Ramsey. I always said Wales could win games without playing well because of Gareth Bale, but for Wales to play well, they needed Aaron Ramsey. Now, that's not quite the way now, but for a long time, I think Aaron Ramsey was just often the difference, and Bale would win games for us.
Yeah, it's interesting. I was going to ask you about Aaron Ramsey because whilst he was out this year with an injury, or this season, sorry, I saw a few people sort of questioning, can he still do it and things like this on social media or pundits. And I was astounded by it because particularly in 2016 for Wales, I thought he was the one that we missed all the time. If he didn't play, we were never the same team. And of course, there was others. Gareth Bale, of course, takes the headlines. But, people like Ben Davies and Neil Taylor, and, they were massive for that squad. But for me, I say quite often, and I like to remind people of it because I think it's one of my few opinions that I'm very, very wholeheartedly, I won't budge on, is that if Aaron Ramsey didn't have the leg break that he has, he goes on and becomes one of the top 3 midfielders in Europe for, throughout the peak of his career, because I believe he's that talented. And he's obviously shown that at the highest of levels. It's just unfortunate that following that serious injury, he's kind of picked up a lot of muscular injuries in the aftermath. Do you go along with my assessment of the qualities of Aaron Ramsey, or am I overselling it?
No, you don't have to sell anything to me about Aaron Ramsey. He's been one of my favourite players. He continues to be. You'd have to say even 45 minutes on Saturday or whatever it was. Now that was the championship, so you're not comparing apples. You're almost comparing apples with pears. I will quote Kevin Ratcliffe again. He said when he played, what they lacked, and I agree with him on this, what they lacked is a number 10. Do you know the number of times Wales in the past years, during the time of Mark Hughes, of Kevin Ratcliffe, they lacked a 10, a creative 10. They had the Barry Horns, the destroyers. They had the Peter Nicklases. That Terry Oth could destroy a midfield when he was on form, and because he was, he was that sort of player. But they lacked a number 10 with the ingenuity and the guile of Aaron Ramsey. And Kevin Ratcliffe always said that. And they always suffered against the likes of Haji, of Shifo, of Mateus, the number 10s who could run a game. On his day, Aaron Ramsey was the peer of a lot of those great midfield players. You don't go to Arsenal and play the number of times he did, win what he did. You don't go to Juventus and win a Serie A, without being quality. And that's what he was, and Wales benefited. And I still say no. I don't need to remind you, sir. It was Ramsey and Ben Davies missing for that semi-final. Who knows what might have happened? I know I wouldn't have been watching the final in a Greek island if possibly Ramsey and Davies had played.
Well, that's it. Yeah, I think that's the one, isn't it? Straight away in the comments, on the live comments now, there's people saying if Ramsey wasn't banned, it's one of those sliding doors moments almost. But it kind of is what it is. But it's interesting. I completely agree with what you were saying. Well, Kevin Ratcliffe said about that number 10, because we had like Mark Pembridge, all the players that you mentioned, and we always had good forwards, but we never quite had that person to knit it all together. You could have Giggs, you could have Rush, Hughes, Bellamy, all these, Hearts and up front, but it was that one player who just knits it all together.
Yeah.
And it's interesting, isn't it? Just
he's a maestro. He's a maestro.
Yes, absolutely. I couldn't speak to you, Rob, without asking you about really the man who spearheaded and started the revolution of Welsh football. Obviously John Toshak brought in some of the youngsters, but it was obviously Gary Speed who took that on and really changed the way Welsh football viewed itself, I think, in terms of the professionalism off the field, playing the youngsters, the way we went about playing football, the way we conducted ourselves overall. It felt like there was a big change. What's some of your sort of best memories of Gary, if you don't mind sharing?
There's plenty. First of all, he was a lovely fella. There used to be a time where we'd travel with the team and they'd made a muck-up on the seats. And so a couple of the Welsh players had to sit among the media, which is not normal at all. And Gary Speed was one of them. And he saw myself and Tommy Morgan, who used to summarise for Radio Cymru. He said, I'll go and sit with Rob and Tommy. which was the mark of the man as far as I was concerned, because some players would run a mile from sitting next to a journo. But we talked a bit of football, but not much. It was more about guitars and stuff like that. And then there was another moment where, when they were in America, and I thought had gone on the trip. I thought he pulled out the trip with a back injury. So they said to me in the office the Friday afternoon, "Oh, give Gary a ring, see if he can do something looking ahead to the game." And I did ring him, and he said, "Rob, do you know what time it is here?" And I said, "Well, it's whatever time it was with me." I said, "You're over here, aren't you?" "No," he said, "I've come away with the squad." But he said, "Ring me back in a couple of hours and I'll do something with you." That was how good he was. And as a player, what a brilliant player. Obviously won. There was football before the Premier League. Obviously won the last Division 1 title in that brilliant Leeds midfield. Great footballer. And this sums him up to me. The first, I'm pretty certain one of his first games was like a nations, what do they call it? Carling Nations competition in the Republic of Ireland, where Northern Ireland Republic. So we lost anyway. I'm pretty sure it was his first game. I'd have to check that. Yes. We lost, and I was stood in the airport, and I was looking a bit glum. And he said, "What's up, Rob?" And I said, "Getting used to this now, just going on trips and losing, and it's just getting a bit fed up." And he gave me the 5-minute pep talk of my life, saying, "You've got to get out of this, because give us time. We'll do this. We'll do that." And he had me bouncing by me. I don't want to get out and play as I go on the plane. And of course, I can't help thinking, but I remember the 4-1 win over Norway, and the last interview I did with him, which was about 2 weeks before the news came through. And that's a day I'll never forget, because I was in the shower. I was just getting up, actually, and I had a phone call to say, "Rob, sit down. I got some really bad news. Gary Speed has passed away." We didn't know exactly what it was then. And I didn't wait. I got in the shower, got dressed, said to the kids, "I'm off to work. I don't really know what time I'm going to be home." And we did a phone-in special that afternoon, just about Gary Speed. Howard Wilkinson was on there. Rob Earnshaw, really emotional, was on there. And I sensed, it was one of those stories, Simon, where for maybe 2 weeks you thought of absolutely nothing else. It obsesses I know I'm a journalist, so I'm detached. I'm not, it's not me who's suffering, although we all suffered the heartbreak of Gary Speed. But it was the same with Salah. For 2-3 weeks, thought about nothing else. And in a happier way, going to the Ryder Cup in the Celtic Manor. Anything could have happened in the world outside, but all I was obsessed with. And the Gary Speed thing was one of those, so tragic. But then it showed so much how much he was loved, because I went to Newcastle, I went to Leeds. He was a huge loss. But you're right, he contributed. I do think John Toshak's role is probably still underplayed. I think Mark Hughes made a big difference as well. Gary Speed and Chris Coleman will tell you. Chris Coleman had the hardest job, I think, of any Wales manager, taking over from Gary Speed, a guy he used to room with, a mate of his. And I know he checked with Roger Speed and Gary's mother before he even considered going for the Wales job. And what a job he made of it. So brilliant.
Yes, it was something which obviously it not only shocked everyone, but I think, like you say, you just couldn't think of anything else for such a long time afterwards. It was unbelievable, the outpouring of emotion around that time. So Rob, just before I do let you go, this is the Cardiff City Hour.
I was going to say, you could ask me about Cardiff City.
Yeah. So I wanted to ask you, obviously you've covered, again, you've covered so many different generations, I guess, or eras of Cardiff City, from the Rebrand, the FA Cup final, Carling Cup final. What's some of your fondest memories covering Cardiff, and how difficult was it to cover, things like the rebrand, where there's so much anger?
Yeah. Well, I started covering Cardiff City in '87, believe it or not. That's when I started on the Echo. And Cardiff got promoted the first year I was covering them. Under Frank Burrows, who remains one of my favourite managers of all time. And times are different then, Simon. I could ring the manager every morning. That doesn't happen anymore. So I've seen a lot of lows with Cardiff City. I've seen highs as well, the two promotions to the Premier League, the promotion of the Championship that day of, because I was privileged to watch every final that weekend. All the finals were at the Millennium Stadium. Cardiff was the Sunday. It was Bournemouth Lincoln on the Saturday, and I was doing updates from there. And then on the Monday, it was the Nathan Blake game, Wolves against Sheffield United, when Nathan battered poor old Rob Page, and Wolves got promoted. So under Dave Jones, as it turned out, who later turned up at Cardiff. The rebrand was really awkward and really difficult, and it was ill-conceived. It was it's something that shouldn't happen at a football to a football club, no matter who you support. I don't think you can you can't, to my mind, you can't change football clubs. You can have more than one, because if you supported a club in the lower divisions, then you often had a Premier League club when I was growing up, or a Division 1 club as it was when I was growing up. So I don't think that's a problem. But the rebrand really did divide the support. I've often wondered what would have happened had Cardiff done really well in the Premier League, as Redbirds, as people called them. But for some, Anis Abraham being one of them, that was a point of, I won't say no return, because people like Anis still go, but you know what I mean. It was a non-negotiable that should happen. So yeah, I mean, I've seen. Put it this way: it's never been dull covering Cardiff City. I banned for a year, a whole season. Yeah. That was when Tony Clemmer was the chairman, although it ended up after that. Tony Clemmer and I got on really well after that, but he did ban me, and the ban was lifted. I used to have to go in disguise to Ninian Park to do games for the Echo, and then the ban was lifted when Rick Wright walked in and brought the success that he did in his own inimitable style. So I've seen some unbelievable sights at Cardiff City, and been to some unbelievable games and made some really good friends there as well. And I can't talk about Cardiff City without, got really friendly with Nathan Blake, and people say to me, I'll never forget the night I heard that Peter Whittingham had passed away, because Wits brought so much joy. Again, I'll borrow a summarizer's phrase. Jason Perry summed it up. He said, nobody made you smile more than Peter Whittingham in a game, because he would do things and you just go, wow, and just, smile. A bit like Rambo, a lot like Rambo, in fact. Might not be a match winner every game, but he'd do something that would make you smile and light up a game. And he also had a great personality as well.
Genius, I think, is the word, isn't it?
Yeah, genius. Yeah, genius. You're right. You're right. And when people ask, who's the best Championship player you've ever seen, I'd have to say Wits is up there, definitely. But Adil Tarat maybe comes up there with him. But I think that goes for a lot of clubs. They would say that fans of a lot of Championship clubs, being honest, all got their own favourites at clubs. But Peter Whittingham would be in, I would think, most Championship, long-serving Championship fans' best 5-6 players of all time.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, generally speaking, when you see like those types of polls on social media, like the greatest Championship player of all time, Peter Whittingham is always, he's always in the top
two. He's in there, really. Yeah, he's in there.
I think that speaks for the quality of the footballer, but also the quality of the man. I had the pleasure of speaking to him once, in passing, but I never had the pleasure of, having a sit down with him or anything like that, unfortunately. But
Well, I'll tell you a
the
great
people I'm
story,
friends
Simon.
with just say he's amazing. Go on.
Let's wrap up the two. Aaron Ramsey scored against Chase Town in the FA Cup. You remember that?
Oh,
On
yes.
that run to the final in 2008. And I think I might have interviewed Aaron that day. He wasn't a great talker there. Craigie, he was only 16 or whatever he was. Yeah. And Wits walked out, and so I waited for Wits and talked about the game, talked about the win. And I said, "What about Aaron Ramsey?" And he went, "Whew." And I said, "Wits, you're going to have to say more than that because I need something from you about him." So yeah, he was just a lovely guy. They're both really good. They were both really good to deal with, and Rambo still is. And everybody, which deserves what he's got in the stadium.
Absolutely, 100%. Last question then, Rob.
Yeah.
Bear in mind we've got the assistant manager stroke first team coach ready to go in a minute. Do you think Cardiff City will stay up this year? Yeah,
I think they just will. I think I'm a big fan of Darren Purse, by the way. So hello, Darren, if you're listening. And a really good captain at Cardiff City when he was a player. Yeah, I think they got enough to stay up. I think what might keep them up is I think they've had a really good January. Now, I hesitate to say that because I thought they did okay. I thought they were quite shrewd in the summer, but obviously the biggest signing didn't work out at all. But Salek has come in and has done what you want him to do. And he could even say to himself, well, I've got 2 points already because of the late goals on Saturday and at Millwall. And I think that I like the look of Alves on the left-hand side as well. And I like the look of the Manver in midfield. So I think they've done well in the transfer window. And I think a mark of a good coach, I'll include Darren in this as well, is how they improve players. And I think the likes of Cian Ashford has improved this season. So, and hopefully Ruben, who I'm a huge fan of, is coming back into his own as well. And they're starting to get goals. It may be touch and go, but I do think they should have just enough.
So Darren just missed your compliments of him. So I'll tell him all. I'll tell him all the bad words you said about him now. No, he's just come in. Rob, I honestly could sit and I could speak to you for hours and hours and hours. I appreciate you giving me your time this evening.
No worries.
And I'm sure we'll do it again soon, one day, hopefully. But thank you very much, and congratulations on an incredible career as the voice of Welsh football, mate. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Cheers.
Cheers.